Hello and welcome to Keeping It Real. It's our regular spot here Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern. Great to be back with you again. Thanks very much for tuning us in here on live stream or on our website, alltalktv.com, where you just click on the watch live button and you can interact with us too. If you've got comments or questions, there's a little chat bar where you can put in your comments or questions for me or any of our guests. And I'll tell you who we've got with us today. I'm very pleased to introduce you to David Graeme. He is the president of Belyea Brothers Heating and Cooling. They do much more than heating and cooling, but that is where they got started. Actually, to tell you the truth, plumbing is where they got started, and I believe that they have the first plumbing license in Toronto anywhere. So it's kind of like that story about, the guy who's so old that his social insurance number is number one. Well, these guys are number one as far as plumbing licenses go. So they do heating and cooling, renovations, plumbing, all kinds of things. And I also have with me today Alastair Coleman. He's the president of Alancor. And Alancor works together with Belyea Brothers to do renovations and construction projects, but not just any renovations and construction projects. Of course, they're high quality, but we have something else to tell you about Alastair. He's also the founder of A Greener York. So this fits well into the heating and air conditioning thing, because heating and air conditioning consumes most of the power. I believe I read that on one of your websites. Yeah. So that's a key area, and there's all kinds of areas how to be environmentally conscious and how to do so in a way that is economic and feasible. So let's start, David, with you. Tell us about your company. You do so many different things. Where are you focusing these days?
We do. The main focus of Belyea Brothers, as you rightly said, started off with our plumbing and heating, which we've done for over 100 years now. The focus over the last kind of 15 or 20 years, though, has been twofold. One, to ensure that the hot water heating side of homes, and many homes in older Toronto have hot water heating, is of the best quality that we can do with the highest efficiency boilers that we can install. With that, we have resurrected our renovation division. We started our first renovation actually in 1934. And 15 years ago, we really moved back into renovations in a big way, because we saw that most general contractors didn't understand the heating and cooling requirements of a renovation. Mm-hmm. And so if we were to marry both things together, we could ensure that when a job was finished, our clients would get what we promised. What the picture we painted would be what they would get. And there wouldn't be a ton of extra bulkheads or pipes or things added on afterwards that nobody thought about. But at the same time, my little motto to myself was, I want what's behind the wall to look as good as what is in front of it. So if the paintwork looks really great, I want all the pipework behind that wall to be as good as what's in front of it. So I want it to be as efficient as possible. So we've gone a long way down the road of ensuring that any heating or cooling jobs we do behind our building work is as environmentally friendly as possible and as efficient as possible.
Okay, so how did you meet Alastair, and how do your companies work together?
Well, it was really interesting. We met Alastair. He actually called us to help him on a heating and cooling project at a job that he was project managing. After that, Alastair came to our office and said, look, I think that our mindset, the way both our companies work, are very, very similar. So we started talking about the residential side of the building work, which is what we do. And we started talking about simple things like LED lights. And Alastair really made me think. When we do a reno job and rebuild a kitchen, we typically put in halogen lights in the ceiling. Well, halogen lights are typically 50 or 60 watts per bulb. Mm-hmm. You get 12 of those in a kitchen, you've suddenly got 600 watts of heat beating down on your head.
Yeah, you don't need the oven anymore.
You don't need the oven. You don't need a heating system either, because you're just heating your home electrically.
Right. Yeah.
So when we started to look at the LED bulbs that Alastair has in his portfolio, we realised that you could put the same 12 bulbs in and use 60 watts. It's the same as one regular light bulb giving the same light but far less heat.
So there's opportunities I see are there. But now let me turn to Alastair for a moment, because Alastair, first of all, I have seen some of the work that you have done over the years, the renovations work, and it's astounding. We're not. I mean, we have some photos which we can show. Lior can roll them anytime for some of the work that you gentlemen did. But I mean, I've seen you've built some palaces.
Well, I've been involved in, for many years, construction, and built a couple of the finest properties in the world, in Europe. And then really moved into specialist fabrication for many years, museum exhibits and things like that. And now back in construction, and going back to something David said, I mean, about behind the walls, as basically a general contractor, if I'm looking at the work of a subcontractor and trying to evaluate it, the way that plumber or electrician puts his pipes and wires behind that wall, even if it is never seen, tells me a very great deal about the quality of that person's work. So we really did realize that we thought of these jobs. It's fraught with difficulty, renovating houses. People have so much trouble with it. I mean, that, you know, and people fail to realize the cost of doing it properly and actually how to get it done properly without sort of completely prejudicing your family and going crazy during the process. And at the same time, over the last 7 to 10 years, I've become increasingly interested in environmental technology of various types. LED lighting, which I know a great deal about, solar energy, and working with Belyea, what I became conscious of is that in a house, in a home, everyone these days is becoming more conscious of the need, or they wish to do something to help reduce their carbon footprint a bit, so long as it's sensible financially.
Right.
But my realization was that out of all the leading edge emerging technologies that are out there, even the LED lighting and the solar, all of which have their place, the single most important factor in a home and the single most important, significant energy usage is heating and cooling. And second to that, it's housing insulation. So these technologies, traditionally you don't think of your furnace as being a green technology, but in actual fact, it's the greenest technology and the single most significant thing you can do in a home. I mean, even furnaces and heating systems that would be regarded as quite new, 10 years or 8 years, compared with the absolute strides forward in efficiency that have been made in these technologies, there's an amazing difference.
Now,
actually.
but is there, I mean, we've talked about this idea of sensible green, right?
Okay,
because you can go to the extreme and you know, but it should be economically viable.
Well, the rule that I try and go by is, yes, we could go into people's homes and we could recommend they put $30,000 worth of solar panels on the roof. Now, not every home is suitable for that technology. Not every budget falls in with that technology. And so what we're doing really is taking the low-hanging fruit. You don't, for example, replace every light bulb in your house with what are quite expensive LED bulbs. You do this where you're using, for example, MR16 bulbs in your living and dining area that are on 14 hours a day. That is where you make a difference. So
and MR16, these are the traditional
the
bulbs
MR16 is the small, fancy pot light that many people have
that
these
generate
days.
an immense amount of heat that people are used to buying.
Well,
at
the
Home Depot or
comparison,
whatever.
and this is something we're putting into our renovations as standard, is this kind of lighting where appropriate. An MR16 bulb traditionally
like a weapon
is
of
50.
sorts.
It is the Darth Vader of modern lighting.
Right.
They're 50 watts per unit. They emit an immense amount of heat to the extent that if they're in a basement and you stand a foot under it, it can burn the top of your head.
Wow.
Now, the equivalent, which is a bulb that looks exactly the same, goes in the same fitting, the same color temperature, you can have cool white or warm white, actually uses 1/10 of the electricity. They also are rated for approximately 50,000 hours, which means that effectively in a residential situation, you will never change a light bulb.
And so these LED lights, I mean, can people buy them anywhere, or how do they get them?
You can and will. I mean, the big three, Philips, Sylvania, and Philips said they intended to dominate the LED market within 5 years, and they probably will. They're beginning to come out in Home Depot and other places, but the technology moves so quickly that what is available right now is not quite of the quality that it needs to be to truly replace what you've got. It will be within a very short time.
Okay, so if you're, let's say you're, we were talking, David, before about this, the air conditioners, and we're talking about LED lighting is one thing, but air conditioning and furnaces, these are pretty expensive. So you want if you were to get the most expensive, or not the most expensive, that's my concern. So what's the trade-off? What's a sensible investment? How do you?
It actually does depend on each house. Many houses are very standard in shape, and therefore you can say a furnace or a boiler, if it's hot water heating, would fit this particular house and give you these sorts of results. And on the forced air side of the house, you don't get many chances to do anything other than just put in a furnace as a change out. It's one box out and another one in. It's just that the one you put in is, instead of being 80% efficient, is now 95 or 96% efficient. Where it becomes, where you can get a lot more bang for your buck is on the hot water heating side. So if you think that many of the older Toronto homes still have hot water heating, they actually are running with the best heating system you can get. What people don't realize is that a house heated with hot water compared to the same size house heated with forced air costs 20% less to run a year on heating. And
so that's still a good system.
It's brilliant, but you need to move from a mid-efficiency boiler to a high-efficiency boiler.
Okay.
The fun really comes when we start to do renovation work in those sorts of homes. We can add radiant in-floor heating. So instead now of having a big cast iron radiator somewhere, we can allow a kitchen renovation, for example, to take up the whole kitchen space, and we can give all the wall space back to cabinets.
Right. Okay.
We then do what we call a radiant staple up, which means we take the ceiling of the floor below down, we staple up tubing underneath the floor, put it back together. Now the floor is gently warm. So if that floor, for example, is tile or a really lovely wood, that floor to the bare foot is gently warm.
That's nice.
It's wonderful. It's very difficult to do that in a house heated with forced air only. And it's interesting to have the discussion, because we're finding more and more that homes are being designed, or renovations are being designed, and there's a forced air element in there, but the homeowner is saying, I want radiant in-floor heating. If you're going to renovate my basement, I want the floor to be warm. Well, it gets back, and it's a really good point that they're thinking about, that if the floor is warm, it's like having a giant radiator heating up your whole house. If the basement's warm, it's far easier to heat the main floor and the second floor than it is if you go to one of the older homes that have got no heat in the basement at all, because that's robbing heat from the main floor. It's trying to heat the basement up by stealing heat from the main floor.
Okay, so is that a time when people will often call you in when they're doing renovations?
Well, this is one of the exciting things, and why I love doing the renovations so much, that we get called in. We're able to offer a client an oversight of a complete project, which includes heating and cooling, in a couple of visits, because it's us doing the work. We're not having to call in a heating and cooling specialist because we only do general contracting work.
Right.
We're able to say, here's the entire package. And the reason that we want to do your floor or some radiators or ductwork like this is because, in our experience, this is how we get the best results from it.
Right. I also imagine, in the city of Toronto, there's a lot of older homes. So with the renovations that are going on, if that home hasn't been renovated in 20 or 30 years, there's probably a lot of opportunity for improvements. It could be drafty, poor insulation.
Yeah.
Do you see that very often?
Yeah, we do tons of times.
The insulation is the second big factor, the heating and cooling, but then the insulation. Obviously everyone knows about loft insulation, but other aspects of the building envelope, the cooling.
What about the foam, Alastair? The foam?
Well, insulation is another technology that has moved on in leaps and bounds, where we're now using spray foam technology instead of, we're not just putting fiberglass bats in the loft, we're putting spray foam technology in walls and in ceilings.
Right. So, and it's, I mean, given our climate here in Toronto, it gets cold, right? So, if you're doing a renovation in the summer, don't forget what is going to be,
we're looking
especially
now,
if it's a new home.
Just as an example, we're looking
market,
right in the middle of a job now. It's a very difficult situation.
It is, yeah.
The client has bought a house, not too long, the house was only built 5 years ago, and found that he has serious problems with his heating and cooling. Some areas of the house are heating adequately or cooling adequately, others are not. He has his offices above the garage, where basically so we're having to look at this house from every different point of view.
And it's only a 5-year-old house.
It's only a 5-year-old house. So we're having to look at the house with thermal imaging to identify failures in the insulation on his garage ceiling, so that we can then take down and recommend take down, replace, and solve that problem.
Right.
We're installing a furnace in the attic, reducting all that, so we can sort out the second floor problem. These are and time again we are called in to look at houses, older houses or newer houses, and time again we go back to the absolute fundamentals that people need to be thinking about. We love doing lovely kitchens and lovely bathrooms. We actually enjoy doing it, producing good jobs. But there are fundamentals in renovating a house that must be addressed before otherwise you're wasting this client's money. We had another client where we have said to them, okay, well, we will renovate your basement. Well, actually we didn't. We said we will not renovate your basement. We will first rip out the entire basement floor and replace it for you. Because if you don't do that, you are throwing your money away. And better to get that in, sort out your insulation on your walls, your drainage and everything else, and wait till you can afford to put a shower room in there.
Right.
Because in terms of the capital value of the house, as well as their own quality of life, it's a decision that has to be taken. And
now, we have a lot of real estate agents watching the show, and I imagine that, with some homes that people are buying, they're purchasing, and they have an eye to, like, the first thing people see is renovation potential. I mean, they don't think about, I imagine they don't think about the heating or cooling, but it's something that
they don't.
That it's very important to address, and it's a great opportunity to address it, and it's essential, I assume, in cases to address it at the same time.
Well, it is, and quite frankly, we have on our own staff licensed home inspectors, or people who work with us but happen to be licensed home inspectors. So when we go into, and as you rightly say, when someone buys a new property, it's often at that time they're walking around thinking, well, we do this, let's have a new bathroom, or perhaps the kitchen cabinets or the floor. And very often they're either failing to consider the heating or cooling until it goes wrong, and not really considering other issues that are much easier to deal with at that stage, rather than waiting 2 years till you're firmly ensconced in the house and suddenly finding you have to replace your radiator system or your ductwork.
Or and there's an opportunity too, because when you're ripping out walls and doing other things,
spray foam insulation.
That's the time to be looking at it.
Absolutely, you're right. It's amazing how much air infiltration in older Toronto homes there is, for many reasons. The house is old. The mortar between the bricks falls out in a few places, not obvious, and you end up with that older construction where the timbers that hold up the floor, the joists, actually sit on the inner brick wall. So there's no insulation in the floor joists. And if there's a piece of mortar's fallen out, you've got air coming in from outside straight under the floor joists.
Right.
So you're quite right. If when doing your kitchen or bathroom, you take the walls down and you spray foam those walls, suddenly all those little holes and stuff disappear. You get no more air infiltration. The difference is like night and day. So, and it's one of the things that we have a discussion about, because these rooms are usually pretty small. The old bat that would hold drywall up, or in that day plaster and lath, might only be 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch. So you don't want to put a 2x4 on there because you've suddenly taken 1/3 off the size of the room. But if you were to put a 2x2 piece of strapping, so that's kind of 1 3/4 finished, and then you spray foam between those, the difference in the insulation, you haven't taken away a lot from the room, but you've added a lot on the exterior wall insulation. You don't get the draft blowing through the electrical outlet or the draft coming through the bit around the window.
I've had that before in a house once. Not fun. There's nothing, you know, when you buy a house, and even if the house looks great and then the weather starts getting cold and the draft starts coming in, not pleasant.
It is the natural fact of older Toronto homes, and I get, and something that I guess people have tolerated and put up with for many, many years. But now it is possible to actually make huge improvements in that.
Right.
I suppose it's all part of the discussion. If one discusses it properly and it's possible to show clients why you would like, and you're suggesting a way forward, then most clients will say, you know, I totally understand, let's go down that road because I believe it's the right way to go. It's absolutely straightforward.
If they have the opportunity and are given the tools to make the right decision.
Right. Well, the first tool is for them to pick up the phone and call either one of you guys. We have your websites on the screen, belyeabrothers.com, and we also have allencore.com on the screen. I don't know if you want to give a phone number for either one of you, or...
Yes, if you'd like to call Belyea Brothers, it's 416-425-1200.
425-1200, area code 416. That's the number. So if you are doing some renovations or you have heating and air conditioning issues, heating and cooling issues, these are the guys. There's no question. I would definitely call you guys. So pick up the phone, visit the website, call either David or Alastair, and you can be sure that the job's going to be done right and you will get the right advice. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on Keeping It Real today. Stick with us. In a few minutes, I'm going to be taking an opportunity to toot my own horn just a little bit, which I never do. I'm just going to be doing a presentation. If you're a real estate agent or any business professional and you're watching this, so you can see what some of the tools are that we have here at Alt Talk TV for either starting your own show, promoting your business, being on a show. So hang in there. We'll be back in just a few minutes. You're watching Keeping It Real.